Hey there, this is That News You Care About, a weekly video game news show from the folks over at That Nerdy Site. Today is Thursday, July 23rd of 2020, and I'm one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson. Joining me this week is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
Freshly back from vacation.
Yes, I hope you're feeling refreshed here, rejuvenated, like a lovely Phoenix, Arizona summer day. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
it's going well.
And I'm also joined by the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, Frank Pisani. How are you doing, Frank?
Living the dream.
Living the dream. That's what we like. We're rocking some positive energy here today, guys. I like this. And now we're going to bring it to a crushing halt. Xbox had their game showcase today for next generation of video games. What could it be? And we thought, instead of going down and listening to every game that we saw and had thoughts on and everything like we did for PlayStation's event like a month ago, time's a circle. I have no idea how long ago was. Some point in the past. We're instead going to focus on some positives here. Our top two favorite games we each kind of saw from the showcase, go over them, go over why they kind of had us interested, and then in the episode, just kind of a quick summary of the showcase as a whole, and our thoughts about what Xbox's upcoming lineup looks like. Trevor drew the short straw, or the long straw, I guess, just a straw, and he gets to go first. Trevor, what was the first game that you had a positive reaction to?
Well, I'll defer to you if you want me to do this now or later, because I've got a few honorable mentions that I want to give a little bit of a shout out to.
Let's go honorable
even though
mentions
they
now.
didn't
Let's get them out of the
make
way
my
right now.
top two. Like, it's weird because a lot of the things that like spoke most to me personally as a gamer from this just didn't really get as much of a showcase as I would have liked.
I agree.
But a lot of the ones that really jumped out to me would have been something like Tell Me Why, which I know we'll circle back around to. That's the Don't Nod game. Looked really cool, and I was basically getting like very much Life is Strange 3 kind of vibes from it. The reason it didn't really crack into my top there is because it's another episodic one, chapter 1, coming out August 27th, and I'm just like, I pretty much always wait to play those games until they're all done. I don't have the patience to play a chapter and then come back to it 3 months later or something like that. So I'll be waiting on that one, but I'm definitely keeping my eyes on that one. Then you had a pair of games from Obsidian. You have Grounded, which was the How Honey I Shrunk the Kids like game that basically seems to be kind of a survival Minecrafty slash Fortnite thing, but in a with very tiny people in a backyard. Probably not going to ultimately be my kind of game because of the multiplayer like components to it, but it looked cool, and I just appreciated the charm of that. And then their RPG Avowed, again, just didn't show me enough to really like give me any real semblance of what that game's going to be. But I like Obsidian RPGs, so it'll definitely be on my radar now. And then Hellblade: Senua's Saga. They really kind of only talked about like, hey, we're setting the game in Iceland, so
It exists, yeah.
there's a dev diary that you can go watch after the showcase, and I was like, cool, but like I just kind of want more of that game. I just want to, but whatever. And then lastly, Fable, which again, like, it was a great like little closer for the show, but it just didn't give me enough about what the game is. It was just kind of a cute little trailer saying, hey, we're making Fable again, yay. But just not enough to really give me like yeah, this is one of the top two games I want to showcase kind of when we talk about stuff. But I will, so diving into my first pick officially, I'll kick things off with Halo Infinite.
The flagship of the
the flagship, the game that kicked off the event. I admittedly not a Halo fan. I didn't really play Halo on the original Xbox, and then I didn't have a 360. So
Same.
my only exposure to Halo has been through Halo 1 and 2 in the Master Chief Collection. And playing those games 10, 15 years after they originally came out just didn't really hold up for me. So I didn't really get drawn in. But Halo Infinite I thought looked really cool. I'm seeing like I've been largely like in and out of Twitter today, and a lot of people seem to be like down on the game graphically or something like that. But I'm like, it looked cool to me. It looked very much like Halo to me, with a lot of its goofy character designs and stuff like that. Yeah, I appreciate that they seem to be doing kind of a more open world ish approach, kind of stuff that they played around with in like Gears 5. Had sections where it was like, hey, you can go do these objectives in any order you want. There might be things on the world to find and discover. One of the things that intrigued me the most about what they showed off was the idea that they showed that, like, press the menu button to start the demo, and then they went into the demo and it started out with that little cutscene and then went straight into gameplay stuff of this sequence where you're trying to deactivate 3 anti-air towers. And I was like, are they about to like launch this as a like demo that you can go play on your Xbox One right now after the show or something like that? They didn't, but like I feel like they were showing that it is a demo, a playable demo for a reason. So I feel like that's got to be coming out sometime soon. Maybe they just want to fix like a few more bugs in it or something before they open it up to anybody. But like that's the thing that like leaves me the most excited about the prospect of it, was that it seems like it's something that they can push out to the Xbox ecosystem as a playable demo that everybody can kind of get their hands on before it comes out this holiday season.
It'd be really awesome if they did that, and I think it'd be even like I think it'd be awesome if it was just up as a demo for everybody. But I could totally see them being like, "Hey, if you have Game Pass, you can try out the demo of Halo Infinite right now." Like,
Exactly, yeah.
Like that would be awesome.
Halo Infinite is one for me where, very similar to you, Trev. I don't really have any sort of strong connection to Halo. The most I've played of it is when the Master Chief Collection came out. One of my buddies back in Missouri and me had the idea of like, we're going to go through and basically co-op every one of the games, the Master Chief Collection. And then we got about like 3/4 of the way through Halo 1, because we were also playing it on the hardest difficulty, and we were just like, you know what? This is burning us out. Like, we're just not going to... Halo 1 is long, and it's not particularly friendly, and just like, this is just... And so we just kind of got burnt out and just kind of didn't ever go back. And
why would you do that, especially for like a first time through the game?
I mean, we like to punish ourselves, clearly.
That was what, like, our friend Scott White over at Irrational Passions just did that with, he was doing that with Last of Us, right? When he was like going back and playing through the original Last of Us.
No idea,
he did it on like the hardest difficulty. It's like, why? Why would you do that for the first time you're playing this game? Like, maybe work your way up to something like that.
I feel like we have the same thing at kind of both instances here, but I definitely know from personal experience that it just legitimately like hampers your experience with the game. Like it makes you not like a game that you may otherwise like. Because I think like survival mode is a cool thing in Last of Us, but I feel like it just kind of ruins so much of what makes the game good. And I imagine Halo does the same thing, especially in co-op, because the thing I always hear about those legendary co-op campaigns is you basically just use one person as like a spawn point, and then one person just kind of like shoots everything. So I'm like, for a first time, I could definitely see why that you'd like give up.
But I mean, it was fun enough, right? Like, that's always my thing with Halo, is that like, I don't have any negative feelings towards Halo. I just feel fairly neutral about it. It's like, it's fun. I think it's a fun shooter and everything. But for me, it's always been, I kind of swung the direction of Call of Duty in terms of like mid-2000s to current shooters. And I haven't really kind of looked back. But I mean, like, if Halo Infinite is great, if it is a, standout video game and people kind of flock to it, then yeah, I mean, like, I'll be more than happy to check it out. If there's other things on the Xbox as well that kind of draw me in. But I mean, in terms of a trailer, I mean, this is clearly the thing that they focus the most, I think, attention and energy on. And I think the trailer and the gameplay and everything that you kind of saw showcase that. It looks fun, looks great. I don't really have the issues with, like, the game not looking pretty enough or whatever. Like, I think the game looks very good. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Frank, Halo thoughts? Anything?
Yeah, like I definitely think it was a good trailer, and I think it was good to definitely just like start off right with that, especially with how much they've like hyped that up going into this. And honestly, yeah, like my biggest takeaway, which I don't think I was like crazy surprised by, but my biggest takeaway was definitely just like, wow, they are really trying to do Combat Evolved here, or like channel
Yeah.
that vibe. And because, so, or sorry, I guess I should also start off with like my history with Halo, because I'm also not really a Halo guy. I probably played the most of them out of us here, because I played one, finished three, I played most of two, and then I kind of fell off after that. And I've watched all of Achievement Hunter's playthrough of five, so I've kind of like kept up with it a little bit. But like I'm not a huge Halo guy, and the only one I ever really enjoyed, and I think is like thought like was legitimately really great, was one. In terms of the campaign, like I really really liked Halo 1, and I totally kind of agree with like even what Logan's saying. I could see like trying to jump in now, or you might have even been Trevor that you said that too, that like kind of going back to it after the fact and trying to jump in now, I feel like it doesn't really kind of it's not that it doesn't hold up, it just doesn't, it isn't what it was 20 years ago. Like 'cause I
Yeah,
played it
yeah.
because like I sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, playing it. I want to say like 5 years ago. I basically played it and the Nathan Drake collection, kind of like in tandem. And even like Nathan Drake is a much more like recent series. So yeah, going back to like the Halo Combat Evolved, like I can imagine it being, an Xbox game and the things it was doing, but there have been so many games that have built on what Combat Evolved did, for shooters in the console space, that it just felt old by comparison. And in particular, it was like you go through, you kind of go through the linear story of that game, and then at some point there's kind of a turning point and you start backtracking, and so it just feels like it feels extraneously padded, because it feels like you're just going back through all the same environments. You're just going back the other way now to get back to where you need to go, and so it feels like they just put like twice as much game in there, but were able to use all the same environments, so it didn't like take as much dev time, and that just, I remember feeling like exhausted by the time I got done with that game.
I think that's a really good point, and honestly, even I agree. And one of the things I even remember from when I played it, this is like when the 360 just like had launched. I kind of went in and was playing. I got one and was playing Halo because it was backwards compatible. Um, and one of the other things I really remember from my time with it, I played through it twice actually. But it's like the signposting
Mm-hmm.
isn't great,
Yeah,
especially because there is like some of these open world type sections.
yeah, I definitely got
Um,
lost a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and that's my thing is because even if I were going to go back, I got lost a lot then, and even if I were to go back now, I would still get lost a lot. And it's kind of one of those things where like we have come so far forward, and so that like a lot of those problems have been fixed. But like at the time, there like it did feel like a really kind of cool, open, unique thing because I had played a bunch of shooters on like PS2 and even like GoldenEye on like N64, and this was like wildly different at the time at least. And it was cool to just kind of get like in one of the early missions, you just kind of get dropped off on a beach where people are fighting, and then it's just like, okay, well there's three objectives, go find them, go do it, and it doesn't really tell you what to do or where to go. But then that kind of leads into our problem here where it's like the signposting's bad. Like I would just drive around on the island in the Warthog for forever until I found something I hadn't seen before, and then you kind of end up exactly what you're saying, where you end up like backtracking a lot. And I think those are problems I think they could definitely fix here. But it just like honestly, I almost felt like it just totally looked like Combat Evolved again, like almost like too much. It looks like I'm like, okay, so you're remaking Combat Evolved in 4K with like HDR now and like gameplay improvements. Because like the Combat Evolved, the early in one of the missions, you crash land on a grassy planet and you immediately come out and just start shooting Covenant and start going through like precursor statues to try to activate stuff. And I'm like, okay, so yeah, this is just Combat Evolved, but in 4K with like HDR and some new things like the grappling hook. I think like it's weird because if you would have asked me before, I would have said, yeah, that's what I want from Halo because Combat Evolved was my favorite one. But then seeing it, I'm like, oh, I don't really want this again. Like I just like I guess I don't know what exactly like I want from Halo. I don't know how they could do this, but I really kind of want that I want the God of War equivalent of whatever Halo is, you know?
Yeah, I feel for 343 obviously inheriting the franchise from Bungie, and I know that like a lot of people basically balked at Halo 5, specifically the campaign of Halo 5, and so this very much feels like a response to that, and maybe they swung the pendulum too far in the other direction, and now people are going to be, very wary of feeling like, hey, I've already played this game before, I don't need to play this, your take on the Halo Combat Evolved story. But I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I definitely want to try and give this one a shot, and maybe kind of, because I have the Halo Master Chief Collection, I can maybe circle back to the other games in the series and pick them up before Infinite comes out. But I also imagine, hey, the holiday season probably going to be a little light on new games for the new consoles, as they often are. So that's this coming out with the new system is probably the best chance of getting me into a Halo that there's been since the original.
But that's enough Halo talk on this podcast. My first game that I want to talk about, that I'm excited about, is Tell Me Why. And I could begin it with a simple fact of I'm someone who loves Life is Strange, the first season in particular, and that is such a special kind of gaming experience for me. But then also, I think the potential storytelling capacity and impact of Tell Me Why is one that I am particularly eager to see told and done well, right? This is a game that has so much potential to it, I think, and so much kind of narrative power line within it and narrative impact line within it. And I trust the team enough. Earlier today, the FAQ that they had on their website was kind of floating around Twitter a little bit. They're kind of aware of or at least some of the potential kind of, I think, pitfalls of this game are. But I mean, Don't Nod knows what they're doing in terms of crafting really, I think, emotional, powerful, personalized narrative games with rich characters and a fleshed out world and compelling storylines, and kind of help turn it into your own personal narrative based on the choices you make. And I think this game and the tease we've seen just has me believing that they can do something really special with this. I don't think they've really ever kind of let me down before in terms of these kind of games. I mean, maybe the Life is Strange standalone DLC thing with Rachel, but that's not the point. But yeah, so I'm very excited for this. I think it looks beautiful too. Again, I just love the art style they kind of use. So I'm very excited to see it, and also the fact that it's gonna be 3 episodes. It's gonna be kind of a bit more intimate, shorter narrative, and not necessarily as drawn as some of the 5-episode arcs. And that they've already kind of been these are the 3 episodes. They're gonna come out at these dates. You don't have to wait 2 months, and then 4 months, and then 1.5 months, and then 2 weeks. It's here's the schedule. We got it. We're gonna unlock. We hear your criticisms. It makes me kind of very excited for what this game potentially can be.
Very cool. Yeah, I hadn't, like I said in my honorable mentions section, I hadn't really seen any of the kind of the extra stuff you're talking about of an FAQ after the fact. So I didn't know that they already have kind of the it's going to be 3, it's going to be on this schedule, that stuff kind of locked in.
I mean, that was some of it. The FAQ is mainly dealing with its stuff in terms of the LGBTQ aspects of the game, and addressing some of potential concerns or questions people had about that. And I think it was super, just honestly impressive to see a company kind of get out and just start saying these things and addressing some concerns people might have, and understand that they're actual concerns people would have and valid concerns people would have and questions. And I think their studio, who, I mean, even from the very first Life is Strange, have kind of been aware of some of these issues and tried to kind of, I think, improve on them each game. And so, yeah, I'm excited for it.
But yeah, I played Life is Strange 2, kind of snuck it in right at the end of 2019, and it immediately it shot up to number 2 on my games of 2019. I just loved the story they told. To play it, yeah. And thought it was just incredibly powerful stuff. So yeah, and Life is Strange, I came to at the year after it came out, so it didn't make the cut for the year that I played it at the time or whatever. But it was still an amazing game. Helped me through like a bad breakup kind of stuff. So like I loved like being able to kind of just dive into their stories. I think they do what Telltale was maybe trying to do, but I think they do a better job and a more interesting job with it. So I appreciate that. And yeah, again, like this is definitely something I look forward to. I just didn't see enough of it here.
Sure.
To really sink my teeth into and hit my kind of like two most excited little things out of it.
Frank, any thoughts on Tell Me Why?
Yeah, it definitely looked really cool. I especially thought like from a story perspective, it looks really interesting because you kind of get that moment there at the beginning where she's kind of like the mom's kind of like chasing him with like the shotgun, and then I feel like they're definitely trying to like, hey, try to figure out like what happened here. Seems like she kind of like attacked them when they were younger, and then they're kind of like dealing with the fallout from that, which I think is like a really fascinating idea to tackle from like a story perspective. Um, I've only played from them. I've only played Life is Strange season 1, and I wasn't like the hugest fan of it. Although I definitely agree with a lot of what Trevor was saying about it and how like they're definitely doing like that Telltale style like a lot more, a lot better and more interesting than Telltale, even just from like how the game actually plays and like what you do. And so I haven't played this Life is Strange season 2, but I kind of want to check it out based on like how highly you guys speak of it. But this, on top of even both of those, like I think looks really, really interesting, and I might even dive in and give that a try. Especially if like you're saying if it's only like 3 episodes, it's kind of shorter. I can definitely vibe with that.
I think Trevor's point of Life is Strange kind of being what Telltale aimed to do but done better is really interesting too, because I think Telltale and Donut kind of went different directions. Where like Telltale pumped out after the success of after the success of The Walking Dead season 1, 15 different properties at once. It felt like they had so many things constantly going. Like they didn't have time to like make tweaks and listen to kind of fan feedback. And I feel like over time they just kind of like burnt out on everything, right? And I feel like Don't Nod has done something very different where they did Life is Strange season 1, but then they waited. I mean, if Life is Strange season 2 came out last year, they would have waited 4 years from season 1 to season 2 of that, and the only thing they did in between was like kind of the standalone DLC for like Rachel Amber, and that was 3 episodes. And then now this new season of Tell Me Why, like they're taking way more time. They're listening to feedback from fans and critics. Like they're tuning things. They're being more attentive to issues people might have. Like it feels like they're actually kind of being more responsive and improving things in each kind of game to game to game, which is what you would kind of want from these things. And I feel like they've made such big strides. Whereas I feel like Telltale just kind of continued to make all of the games in a vacuum. That like, I mean, like, and like I said at the time of like, Life is Strange is like the best kind of choose your own adventure game I'd played at the time. It's still one of the best, and I think they've only improved from that to now, obviously in the 5 years. And so I'm excited to see what they do with this game fully fleshed out, even more so with Telltale just kind of like out of the game now. Yeah, I'm very excited. But Frank, what is your first game that you are excited to talk about and see?
Yeah, and this was also kind of like the first one that I was really excited about or like interested to see kind of during the conference. And I kind of mentioned it in the Slack earlier, but that would definitely for me that'd be Psychonauts 2.
I forgot that's gonna be
with that Jack Black song.
Yeah, I like that too because I mean like definitely like Jack Black, and I thought that was cool. I also kind of like the little like BTS you get there at the beginning, and he's like. He tells the guy, he's like, "Who wrote this song?" And then they're like, "Oh, that was David." And he's like, "This is a great song. I can't wait to sing it." And I love how like that guy was so excited. Like,
Yeah, it was a cool little thing.
I just like, I mean, I'm definitely like, I'm a Double Fine fan. Have been for like forever, going back to like Psychonauts 1 basically, and then even kind of going past that. I didn't play some of these games till later when they got re-released. But like, I'm just a huge Tim Schafer fan. Like from what he was doing at LucasArts, like. Oh, the most like some of the best adventure game. I like adventure games kind of because of Tim Schafer, but it's like I feel like they made some of the best ever made with like Grim Fandango and Broken Age and like Day of the Tentacle, and then let alone like Full Throttle and like Maniac Mansion and like all of these things. that I've since played, and just they continue to just make like really interesting, really unique games that I really enjoy, and I was really excited to see them bring back Psychonauts 2. It's obviously already been announced, and even kind of the main bummer at the end of this trailer is that it seems like it's got delayed because to next year, because I believe it was already it was planned to come out this year, I believe. So now we kind of have confirmation that it's delayed to 2021 with no date. Which is understandable because Double Fine's not like a huge team necessarily, so I'm sure it's probably taken a lot of their manpower to do this. Um, but just even from just the trailer perspective, I thought it was a really cool trailer. I was as soon as the gameplay started, I was even really excited. Like it just looks like everything that was kind of amazing about Psychonauts just turned up to 11. Like it is a platformer, but it's like one of the most unique platformers out there, even in terms of like the powers you get and how like you use the psychic abilities in the world, and then they constantly just try to like combine some of those together. And I think that this is going to be like like the best version of that possible, and I'm just really excited. It also is even just directly continuing the story from the first one, so like that's also really cool, for people who've played the first one.
Trevor, any thoughts?
I mean, I don't. I've never really played any of the Psychonauts stuff. Like and Double Fine itself is often like a very like I have to be in the right mood and mindset for a Double Fine or a Tim Schafer game. Like I loved Broken Age when I finally sat down and played it, but that was probably like the third time I tried to sit down and play through it. And same with like going back and playing through some of the kind of remastered games they brought forth with like Grim Fandango and Day of the Tentacle and that stuff. Psychonauts seemingly being much more in the realm of platforming and stuff is much more likely up my alley, but I don't know. It'll very much kind of be like, hey, is this coming out in a time where I'm looking for something to really hop into and play and do a little, bit of weirdness, or if it, comes out and everybody's like, oh my God, this is really so good. It also comes down to like, hey, do I need to, or do I want to hop back in and play the original Psychonauts, or I might have even bought just to support them at some point, the VR Psychonauts Rhombus of Ruin. So it'd be kind of like, it'd be another like Halo thing where it's like, well, if I want to hop into Psychonauts 2, I'll probably want to actually do the full, like, let me visit the first game, play through the first game, maybe do the VR kind of side thing, and then, be ready for Psychonauts 2 out there. But it's one of those, like, I see it at every PAX we were going to and stuff for the last year or so. And it was just kind of like, it always blew my mind that, like, it was hey, you have to like wait in line or come back and get an appointment to come see a trailer of this game, rather than any kind of like actual hands-on stuff, because it just seemed like, hey, they've been putting in a lot of work on that over a long period of time, and I definitely thought we would have seen more, or it would have been closer to done by now.
I can even agree with that too, because like I did that behind the closed doors demo. Like I managed to get one of the spots, and I went and like watched the whole demo, and it was like over 15 minutes long, and it was nothing shown in this trailer. Like it was just the beginning. It was straight up like the beginning of the game. They kind of explained to you like what was kind of happening, like the setup from the first game, and then it was just kind of like, yeah, this is exactly what we're doing here, and we're just kind of picking up the story from there. And I mean, I thought it looked great. It looked really fun. It definitely looked like Psychonauts. And I honestly wonder, obviously they can't do the full kind of like show or anything, but I almost just kind of wonder like why they maybe didn't show it off a little bit more than they kind of did here. Although I did think maybe they were just trying to go a little bit like deeper in, because what they showed looks like it's farther into the game because of the different abilities you have. So maybe they were just trying to go for that. But I mean, I don't know really on that end.
Yeah, I don't really have any thoughts. But I love Tim Schafer, so I'm always happy to see him do anything fun. Trevor, what is the second game you want to give a shout out to?
Back over to me is, and it's kind of not fair, I guess, because it's not like really a full game, but they showed off Outer Worlds DLC. The Outer Worlds being Obsidian's kind of like new Fallout like kind of game that came out last year, and again was one of my favorite games of last year. So I very much look forward to hopping into the the new little side content seems like standalone kind of expansion that they're doing. The Outer Worlds Peril on Gorgon, with just kind of more of that fun, tongue-in-cheek, slightly dark humor that came with the Outer Worlds coming out September 9th. So yeah, I like that. That really jumped out at me because it was they were showing it off, and I was like, "Ooh, yay, more Outer Worlds." Are they already kind of like teasing an Outer Worlds sequel that maybe will be like Xbox only or something? Because obviously now Obsidian is owned by Xbox, or will this be still multi-platform? Because if it's multi-platform, I will probably just play it and pick it up again on my PS4. Even though that's financially a stupid decision, because I'll get it for free on Xbox with Game Pass if I'm still doing that. So, but I have like my trophies and all that stuff on the PS4. But yeah, that game just has it's right up my alley in terms of the humor and the fun of those kinds of Fallout-esque kind of games. And I thought they did a really good job with it, so I want to keep kind of supporting that world that they're building.
Frank?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely kind of agree with some of what Trevor said. I didn't play the it's the Outer Worlds, right?
Yeah.
The Outer Wilds or Outer Worlds, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and because I keep getting it confused with that other game, but I know that's like many other people. But yeah, I didn't play it, and I'm probably not going to, and I'm definitely saying, of course, I won't be playing this, but it looks really cool. Like, I really appreciate the fact that they are kind of doing their own little Fallout thing, and in some ways, maybe even doing it better than Fallout. And they were kind of the originators of that, and then they even did like New Vegas, which everybody really loves. So I can kind of appreciate that they're just kind of doing that, and I wish them the best for sure. It's just not necessarily what I'm gonna dive into or spend a lot of time with. And that's kind of funny too, because I have the platinum in Fallout 4. Like, I really got into Fallout for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do like a Fallout 5, I'll probably be there maybe, but I for some reason this just doesn't really connect for me.
Yeah, and going back to kind of what I said with my honorable mentions, this, they didn't really show a ton of this one either, but because I'm able to build off of what I already know about the original base game, that already helps kind of give this expansion a leg up, and that's why it makes my top 2 of the cut kind of thing here. But even that it isn't as much from the showcase as it is, well, I played the original base game and I'm interested in playing more of that. So they really could have just announced it or something and not even shown something, and I would have been like, oh, well, that's something I'm excited and looking forward to hopping back into. So it goes to just kind of the overall impression of this that I think maybe we're all a little bit on the same page of, is that they just didn't show us a ton. They showed a lot of games, and clearly the messaging behind today was, this is all new stuff. This is all stuff you're going to get on Game Pass. So buy Game Pass, Game Pass, Game Pass, Game Pass.
Y'all heard about this Game Pass thing?
And it's cool that they showed off 9 of their 15 studios showed off something, and all of that is available on Game Pass. Everything else that they showed is going to be available on Game Pass through their partners and everything. So Game Pass and getting people into that ecosystem is clearly Microsoft's next gen strategy, and it's a great deal, so I can't fault them for it. But I wish they'd showed me a little bit more of a lot of these games, as opposed to, I wish I'd seen more and fewer games, instead of a little bit of a lot of games.
Yeah,
I can. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Logan.
No, I mean, I think kind of shifting it from Trevor's game to my second game, which is As Dusk Falls, I kind of feel the same thought. Where it's there were a lot of games that were shown, but I think Trevor kind of touched on it in a weird way, where it's I both wish I saw more things and wish that I saw less, but saw more of those things. Right? I think whether it's the Outer Worlds for Trevor, or whether it's As Dusk Falls, which we didn't get a lot of time on either, but is something that I am super fascinated by, right? As someone who understanding the baggage but still enjoyed Detroit Become Humans, and to see dream guys and gals come out in this game, like it's like generational aspect of this like kind of narrative story, and just like visually it's beautiful, and just the trailer tease we saw, I'm all about it. But we also, there's still a lot of questions I have about it. There's still a lot of questions I have about most of the things that we saw. Like, this was, I think, in a weird way, less a here's what Xbox's kind of launch lineup looks like for the next generation of games, and instead, here is, you know, an hour and change long tease for why you should get Game Pass, why Game Pass is great. And like, to be fair, they have things that like really sell you on it, right? But it's also a thing of like, but also this is not necessarily the same thing as like, here is what we're going to do next generation wise. Here is like in-depth look at these games. And you could argue that's not necessarily what this is. But I mean, no, it's an interesting conference. We're beginning to veer off, so like I'll throw it to Frank, I guess, real quick for like what your second game was. But yeah, I definitely agree, Trev, after that thought.
Yeah, and I also kind of even just agree with that. But going into my second game, actually too, I would give a shout out to When Dusk Falls as well. Like, I thought that looked really cool.
It looked really cool.
Yeah, it did, but then I kind of have the same thing that you're saying though too, where I was like, well, what is this though? Like,
what is it? Yeah,
because I was like, I'm assuming this is just like a story trailer with almost like storyboards that are kind of painted, but I was like, because they can't have like this like painted art style kind of thing, right, for like the whole game, and I was like, is this like an adventure game? I was like, what is this? And I guess they'll tell us later, but.
Yeah, like it read to me like a visual novel kind of game through that,
that's how I
so
viewed it
like
as well too.
so like I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they do, because obviously it was a lot of like, you know, still shots, but then they have like elements in the background moving or something, like the cache fluttering or something like that. And like, yeah, I guess that also would have been one of my honorable mentions too, in particular because I'm like, oh, I'm interested in the idea of like, this is a game that spans 30 years in the American Southwest, and what does that mean, and how is that story being told? But yeah, it's another one that just didn't show me enough to really get me hooked. I was like, okay, this is cool, but if this is also like the gameplay and it is a visual novel, that's not something I would ever expect to see kind of showcased alongside like a Halo Infinite, so that's really cool. But also, I'm gonna have to know a little bit more about like what that story actually is to really figure out if I'm gonna sink my teeth into it or not.
And I very much agree with that as well. And then the only other thing I thought I would give a quick shout out to was also the Medium. Again, honestly, kind of on the same boat here, where they didn't really show enough, but it looked very cool.
It looks super cool.
I like the idea of kind of swapping between two worlds there. And I only kind of, based on what I saw, almost just kind of like worry if that, you know, if they could really like stick the landing and make something really cool there, or if it would just end up being some kind of like gimmicky thing. But it is just one of those things where I can't tell because they didn't show like enough of it other than just like, hey, this is kind of a cool idea, or like a cool thing we have coming to Game Pass.
Yeah, Frank, to remind me, did you play Dishonored 2?
Yes, I did.
So it reminds me of that level in Dishonored 2 where you basically can like jump back and forth in time, and both those worlds are happening like at the same time around you and stuff. And even, I mean, from like a technical perspective, it's even like in Master Chief Collection, where you can basically like in Halo 2 you can hop between like the original like look of the game and the new high-res look of the game with like the push of a button. So they're using the power of the system to render both versions of the game simultaneously, so you can, you know, hop to and fro as needed. I like the idea of it. And it also reminds me, there was a similar thing in Titanfall 2, a similar like level mechanic where it was like, hey, you can, you know, bounce between these two, you know, parts of the world or something like that. It's just a little too in the horror realm for me, because that's just not my cup of tea. That's not what I'm looking for out of games. But I love the look of it. I love the style and the design of it, and the idea and the concept behind it is really cool and really intriguing, where, you know, whatever you're doing might be affecting something in the other world. and you kind of have to balance those two ideas. But yeah, it's a little like I don't really like the spooky stuff, so probably not going to be for me.
I think that's totally fair, honestly, and I even think that like those comparisons are probably really like accurate, or even from like that level in Dishonored 2 was really cool. I think that's probably like a highlight of that entire game. Um, so it's a cool concept, and it's worked in the past, and I definitely just like wonder, how well they may be able to put it together. I do want to get into my second game here, but do you guys think that it's like almost some kind of tactic to only just like show you a little bit of the game and then be like, well, hey, just go play it on Game Pass and go check it out? Like, or like, do you think that, or that is this just how it worked out?
I think I mean, it's definitely like an easy selling point. I think of like, hey, here's what this game is. If you're interested in more, it's there on Game Pass for you. But I feel like if they really are trying to sell you on Game Pass, they need to give you enough to really like buy into Game Pass. Because like what I think this conference did really was, it did that thing that, good game conferences usually do, where it's like they're trying to find a little bit of something for everybody. So there are a lot of ideas in here where, not every game on this is going to jump out to every person, but, as we've kind of touched on here, like each of us were drawn to a few different games from it. Even if we would have liked to have seen more, there's still enough to like whet our appetite for it. So it's a matter of, is that enough to not only whet people's appetite? I mean, really, I think it's more enough to whet people's appetite for Game Pass than maybe it is to even whet people's appetite for the Series X, which is ostensibly what today's presentation should have been doing. It should have been saying like, hey, here are reasons to buy the next system, so that you can play these games and play them, in the best possible context. I know they touched on a lot the idea that like, oh, the a lot of these games are built from the ground up to run best on Series X or something like that. And it's like, that's cool, but that also goes against their marketing speak of, we're not going to force anybody to move to the Xbox Series X for the first couple years. Everything's going to still be on the Xbox One X, or Xbox One, and you can still enjoy it there. It just might not run as well, which is also frustrating. Like I think back to playing Ori earlier this year, and while I love that game, it chugged a lot and it crashed a lot for me on my base Xbox One. And so them even coming here and saying like, here's how much better it's going to run on the Series X. It's like, cool. So you kind of are forcing us to upgrade to these systems because they don't run well on your older hardware. Yeah, I can play it, but my experience is going to be so much drastically worse on the old stuff that upgrading to the new stuff is the optimal route. And I don't know if the games they showed off here showed off enough to really kind of like encourage that upgrade.
And yeah, I'm definitely 100% with you there on pretty much all that. And I guess, yeah, just going back to my second game, I kind of made a slight audible while we were going here, because even like Logan said, like,
love it.
well, he was like, what was the thing that like you were interested in, excited about, like you enjoyed? And that's where I kind of went from like, oh, the medium and kind of the when Dusk Falls were just kind of things I thought were cool, and then all the other stuff we talked about, I was also kind of interested in. But I just think like, oh, that's kind of cool, or like that, that's for someone. This is one I'm probably not going to play, but I thought it was really cool too, or really interesting, was Grounded. I know you kind of gave a shout out to it earlier. This is that Obsidian kind of survival game. I really like this trailer. I thought it was really interesting. I think it's a really cool concept for a game. I personally don't love the survival games, like, because it's kind of like Rust or like 7 Days to Die, or like Ark. Like I know those are very popular with a lot of people, but it's just not my thing. But I think this is a really interesting setting to put that in. Like it's basically Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, like the game. And like I think that's really cool. And I just really enjoyed their trailer too, because I also like the joke at the beginning is still really funny to me, where I actually laughed when it's like, are you looking for the biggest game this year? And it's like, well, look at Cyberpunk 2077. And
Yeah.
then they're like, but look at us, because we're making Grounded. And I'm just like, that I think that's like really funny. Like it.
Yeah. And even the like from the team that doesn't really make this kind of game.
Yeah, exactly. Because then I laughed and I was already kind of like on board. Like, what is this? And then there's that. And then I was like really enjoying this trailer. And then you get to the Battletoad too. Like I
Yeah.
thought that was really funny. And I guess maybe this is just me going back to like I've been watching all these press conferences forever. Like I'm sure you guys have. But you remember the jokes they used to make in like 2008 or like after that. Like this is like I don't know. I was like, this is not on that level. This is on a different level where they're actually, making funny jokes or kind of like really pitching this game and kind of showing it in an interesting way. And it even has those like Fortnite build mechanics. Like it looks really cool, and I think this is something that could probably really hit for a lot of people. But then at the end of the day, I'm just kind of honest with myself, where I'm like, this is the survival game I'd probably get the most into, but I'm still probably not going to dive in and check it out.
Yeah.
So we'll do just kind of quick final thoughts here. Trev, what were your kind of overall final impressions of the Xbox Games Showcase?
I mean, like we touched on, kind of like my biggest things were a lot of the things that spoke to me. I just didn't see enough of. Like I said, kind of in my kickoff honorable mentions, like of the games talked about, Fable is probably the one that I will actually spend the most time with whenever that actually comes out. I really loved Fable 1 and 2 back in the day. I didn't have 360, so I didn't really stick with the series kind of past that point. But I love the open world RPG and the humor and lightheartedness of a Fable game is exciting, and so like that's really what like I will most likely boot up my my Xbox Series X for whenever that comes out. And so there was just enough of this that was like, hey, yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff here. I don't know how much of it I am gonna actually care about, and I need to see more on some of the things that like caught my eye a little bit. But even those, the fact that they didn't show us more probably means they're a little ways further out. So we'll see how much of this I care about come end of the year for the new generation of stuff.
Sure. Frank, final thoughts?
Yeah, like I really enjoyed the showcase overall. I know we've been getting so many of these lately that I definitely think this was in the top tier of those. I still think
Yeah.
like I'm not trying to be like a fanboy, but I think that like the Sony showcase for me is still like
Mhm.
number one. But I think this is probably second to that. And they definitely feel
Mhm.
like it was a better showing. It was definitely. I appreciate like how diverse it was, and it's definitely like a lot of stuff I'm not interested in or probably not going to play. But I know that like it does kind of speak to someone out there. Even like Fantasy Star Online coming over.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something that I'm ever going to play, but I know that's huge for many people out there. So like that's really cool. And there is some cool things that I'm now kind of on the lookout for, like even from like Obsidian, because I think Obsidian was honestly like the shining star of this conference. Like I thought
Mhm.
everything they had to show looked really interesting and would probably be some of the stuff I would play the most. And so I'm even just interested to see like what else is going to come from them. But yeah, then of course we have a lot of the stuff we've talked about, or a lot of the games like I think are to look forward to going forward. But ultimately, yeah, I do think like kind of like Trevor mentioned, I think it's a little bit weird that it definitely seems like a Game Pass showing and not like an Xbox One X showing or like something, to that degree. It definitely was like, hey, like everything's on Game Pass, everything's on PC, everything's on Xbox One S, and like, um, or just regular Xbox One for now. And like, I think that's an interesting strategy and definitely what they're going for, like this ecosystem. And they just want you to play and pay the subscription fee. They don't care where you are. And like, that's interesting, but that's definitely like, I'm not in that ecosystem. And it's even that's still kind of hard for me to buy in, even if it is just like get it on Game Pass. But like, I feel like for me at least, I probably maybe will dive into some of these games. So if it is just like, hey, get a free month of Game Pass or like free trial, just dive in and see what's there. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like they make their money off of people like me who like I recognize that hey, Game Pass is a freaking great deal. So like I pay it and I just kind of let my subscription keep going, even though I haven't booted up my Xbox One X for 4 months, something like that. I like this pretty much entire quarantine. I haven't really played my Xbox. I've just kind of been playing my other stuff, but it's like a good peace of mind to know that it's there when I want it or if I want to hop into that kind of stuff. So like there's a great strategy there. And I also want to highlight, obviously something that probably is going a little, unspoken in this is the notion that like, look back at the games quote unquote shown off at the Xbox One reveal, kind of like that first push, and like you never would have seen a showcase like this. Because it was such a different mentality. This very much seems like, hey, we recognize that we've screwed up last time around, so we're really trying to lean into games for you guys. So here's a lot of games for you. Here are some of the things from our big things. We obviously have spent a lot of the last few years kind of picking up a whole bunch of studios to make games for our ecosystem to get you into our ecosystem and enjoy. And I think it can very easily be forgotten that, like, hey, this wasn't just Halo, Gears, and Forza. Like, yeah, Halo and Forza were here, but there was so much more to it than, what we think of as the big tentpole franchises for Microsoft for the last, 15 years. So I think the fact that they are showing off a whole bunch of new stuff here is a great sign for the future of the Xbox ecosystem, even if it's not a whole bunch of stuff that jumped out to me. Because I agree with you, Frank, in that, like, yeah, Sony's presentation pretty comparable to this one, I would argue, but has so much more in my wheelhouse because they've been making the kinds of games that I'm more interested in for years and years and years, and Xbox is kind of having to play catch up on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say as my final thoughts the fact that Trev kind of took the point I was going to go for, which is very frustrating, that Trevor Starkey, which is that this to me is the PS4 reveal event in a lot of ways, right? Where it is one where like you screwed up the last generation in a lot of ways, so you're coming out and doing something very different than you did the kind of previous generation launch cycle. It is one that is focused on games in a very different way than the PS4 was, like that launch event, obviously, but still about games ultimately, and about kind of this newfound breadth of diversity of games that Microsoft and Xbox are going to have going forward. And I think in tandem with that is the fact that, and Tim Geddes had this tweet out originally, but I'm going to steal it, which is the fact that at this point in 2020, it's becoming, I think, increasingly clear that Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox are all just kind of increasingly doing their own things, and just kind of like slowly building their own circles. And that's kind of cool to see, right? Like, Nintendo is just Nintendo. It's just like the kid coloring on the walls in the corner, just having a blast, just having like the best time of its life.
Eating glue.
Yeah, and it's like not worried about trying to be like the fastest or like the most beautiful, and just like it's like we're just gonna have a ton of fun. We're gonna do our things. The rules don't apply to us. And like Microsoft kind of increasingly basing everything around Game Pass, and then like PlayStation doing its thing around like actual console exclusives and building up that kind of first party lineup and kind of maintaining the success it had with the PS4, obviously, and kind of both doubling down on that and also expanding that tent out. They're all kind of increasingly inhabiting their own circles, and I think it's super exciting, right? Like, I think the console wars were always dumb. They were always stupid. But like, I can't remember who said this, and maybe Trevor will, but like, it's that thing where back in the early 90s, it was like these companies fighting against each other, and they stopped that long ago. Now it's just like the fans, like the fanboys fighting each other, and it's just like, I think it's just really cool that like I want Microsoft to be good, and I want Nintendo to be good and doing awesome things and having great games, because that pushes PlayStation, if you're like a PlayStation fan, or if you're a Nintendo fan, like other ones doing cool things and having new like innovative features pushes you too, right? Like Games Pass is it is a mind-bogglingly good deal. Like, it's a great deal, right? And like, I hope that like within the next generation of things, we see some sort of equivalent from PlayStation, if not Nintendo, because they'll make you buy everything until the day you die, again and again and again. But at the very least from PlayStation, like, do cool new things and have different features, right? Like, I want these companies to push each other and to force one another to kind of constantly keep elevating their game and raising the bar of what they're doing. And, like, yeah, to Trevor's final point, this is probably comparable to the PlayStation Fit. Like, I would maybe have just like a little bit lower than that in terms of like how it kind of flowed. But collectively, I'm just going to make the assumption now, like, we're just not Xbox guys in the same way that we are PlayStation ones, right? Like, we just inhabit that other world more. And so it's also partially that. But, like, I thought it was good. I thought it was fun. I'm excited to see more on all of these games and, like, read more and to hear more about them. And, like, maybe next week's show we'll dive into, like, some of the more news we've gotten on them. But ultimately, it was, like, a fine show. Like, I don't have necessarily strong thoughts, but it also was not, like, some sort of, like, cataclysmic disaster like prior Microsoft or just game showcase events have been in general. So that's what I will say. If there are no other thoughts, Frank, you had something to say?
Sorry, my last point is I just wanted to. I completely agree with pretty much everything you guys just said too. I'm totally on board with all of that, and I think even Trevor had a great point there, going back to the original Xbox One launch. That this is quite literally a completely different Xbox. In a very good way,
which is kind of cool to see.
Yeah, exactly. And because honestly, like, even being from like the Sony side, even though I had an Xbox for a while, that was like my primary back in the 360 days. I like Phil Spencer a lot, and I think he's steering the ship in a great direction. It's just unfortunate that, like, it is one of those things where, like, this is a battleship and it takes a long time to turn and, like, pivot. And I think they're still kind of in that pivot, and I think they're headed the right way, but right now they just don't have, like, a ton that's appealing to me. And especially when you see that, like, Sony has, like, I think had one of the strongest generations they've ever had, only comparable to like the PS2, and you could kind of fight that fight.
Or SNES, like, it is a all-time classic generation that PlayStation put out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it'll probably even be hopefully like remembered that way, or even still thought of that way in the future. And I just, like, I want Xbox to get on that level, even though I get they're doing their own thing. Like, I just want their games and kind of what they have to offer to get on that level. And I see that they're on the way there. But just for me, they're just not there yet. But I think I'm curious to see where they go. Like, I'm still going to keep watching their showcases and see what they have to offer for us.
I will also say, as a final note for me, is the idea that I think people want or have wanted Microsoft to kind of have, like, this, like, knockout showcase, like, conference event, like they kind of that PlayStation had in their minds from the PS4 kind of launch window. And it's true that PlayStation did have, like, a series of great conferences, like their launch itself, the E3, all this kind of stuff. But it was also that thing of PlayStation had turned the tide years before. Like, PlayStation began making decisions in the middle of the PS3 generation that would ultimately pay dividends when the PS4 launched, right? Like, they had been making decisions years in advance, like, I think, to be fair, Microsoft has done. It just so happened that, like, the actual, like, reveal event itself was, like, this final, like, kind of icing on the cake. But it was not, like, this single event that, like, changed everything on a dime and, like, suddenly, like, reversed the console race. So, like, PlayStation 3's ultimately ended up outselling the 360. It's just, like, nobody thinks about it that way. But, like, PlayStation had spent years kind of turning the tide here. And I think that the people who are upset or think that this has been some sort of, like, kind of disappointment of event because it didn't, like, suddenly make them want to go buy a, like, Xbox or whatever. It's like, well, this is just, like, a piece of the larger puzzle that they've been spending years working on, right? And, like, it's a bit unfair to suddenly expect them to just, like, win a race before it's technically even started. But I am nonetheless very excited for what Microsoft has in store for us. With that is going to be the show. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you. If you like what you heard, you can go support us over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, like all of our wonderful and amazing Patrons have. All of their wonderful support has kept all of the lights on and made shows like this one and like that D Plus show and so many other ones happen, and we're forever grateful for all of your support. If you also liked what you heard, you can go rate, review, like, subscribe, and share on all kinds of podcast services across the globe. Go give us 5 stars. It really does make a difference for new shows like this one. We appreciate it. And somewhere in the world, you will make Frank Pizzani smile. And that's really the greatest gift I can give. And with that, that's the show. You can find Trevor at Trevor J. Starkey on the interwebs. Trevor, what would you like to shout out?
I want to give one final game shout out from the showcase in honor of our compatriot Cameron Abbott. Shout out to Tetris Effect Connected. I should probably give that a little bit of love. Obviously, that's a cool thing that's coming to Xbox. Tetris Effect being Cam's favorite game of all time. I'm sure that one absolutely caught his eye, given that they're turning Tetris Effect into like a multiplayer or co-op experience. So we'll see. I'm very curious to see what that actually ends up looking like, but it was cool to see Tetris Effect show up there in the Xbox show as well.
Battle Royale ?
Battle Royale,
yeah,
Tetris Battle Royale.
Like when it started expanding, I was like, oh, is this like a mix up between Tetris Effect and like the Switch Tetris that's like Tetris 99 or whatever. It doesn't look like it's that, but it definitely seems like some kind of weird hybrid of the two ideas. So I'm very curious to see what it actually amounts to.
Frank, you can find at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to shout out, Frank?
I guess not at the moment. Definitely just, a shout out to the Xbox showcase. It was fun to watch during work today and just kind of distract myself.
You can find myself at Lifty Logie or Lifty Logie. It doesn't really matter anymore on the internet. I'll give a shout out to Trevor's D Plus show offerings all about Hamilton. They're coming out hot, and they're real good. You should go listen to all of them. You can go find That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site on Twitter, Instagram, and all the other things that matter. And until next time, play your games and be good to each other.